to the difference between a vicious circle and a virtuous interaction.
Yes, and
so if that is the epistemology basis of morals, of the moral compass, and I think that's what we're really trying to get to if we're going to be dealing with social sciences in any sense.
Lowell, what do you mean by a virtual interaction?
A vicious or virtuous.
Oh, virtuous. Thank you. Great, virtuous. But what do you mean by that? How do you know that it is a virtuous?
Well, what's interesting about that is when you heard virtual, because that's actually how it's formed in our minds.
Right.
It's like Karl Popper with his ideas of models of the universe and then reality and then the observer, but he really doesn't deal with the observer very much. And so what we're trying to do in second order cybernetics, and your experience with Heinz von Forster, is the aspect of how do we get the observer? The problem is that most of cybernetics got caught in this cul-de-sac of Gordon Pask's the observer observing the observer observing, and so can be no truth, and academic relativism, post-modernism all falls into that trap, that there's no truth. The truth is in the interaction and the design of the interaction. You want to comment on that, Valerie?
Well, I'm still hung up on virtuous.
Virtuous, you mean, how would I define it?
Yes.
Virtuous, you have to do it by the juxtaposition of vicious is it goes in a cycle because all our thinking and perceptions are cycles, just like the frog's eye and the frog's brain. It's on a circuit. The circuit keeps on going. The problem is the interaction with the outside environment and the environment we create within our home, our environment we design, our institutions, our relationships, etc., are polluted by the same cycles instead of getting new evolutionary pathways to respond to the changing logic of the zone of fitness called survival. We see ourselves in the Western tradition as abstracted from the world. We have dominion over it, and that influences our sciences. The science of context of cybernetics goes differently. It can create a virtuous interaction. So what Jason was talking about in the design of the American Revolution, of mind, as I call it, was the difference between just being against oppression, kicking out the British, kicking out the police, whatever it is, and actually changing and transforming the interactions of that society. And how do you design that interaction of society? That interaction that I talked about in terms of economics, ecology. The echo is all about the home management. How do we manage our homes? Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Who determines what is virtuous?
That's a good question.
The system.
well,
the system, because in a I'm just using an American example, the way it was designed is in a representing, or in a republic or republicing, it is the image that changes. And if you provide the capacity to change the image so that it aligns with the reality that the collective intelligence understands, the people's. So that's why they put the power in the people instead of keeping the power in the king, keeping the power in the institutions that exist. So virtuous is the design of a system that can evolve and link to the environment. Jamie, you want to rephrase that in a coherent form?
I don't know whether it's more coherent, but I got the image to mind of just the circle versus the yardstick. I mean, those are my buzzwords, but just the vicious approach is that you have this us versus them, or you have a top class and a bottom class. And Lowell, that's the great chain of being that I'm referring to. And so that there is always a bottom class that is being ignored. And then the thing that actually will get us out of our mess today is the circle. I'm thinking there's that the founders, they kind of, they didn't form a perfect circle, but they tried to act like a circle, like that everyone had a voice, they all listened, and they stuck together. And you could think of the American Civil War as also at that moment they had the choice to break up the circle or not. And I'm not saying that the circle is kumbaya and that it brings peace and everything, but there's a structure that if we make a commitment to it, it's to, I mean, that's the way that I understand the virtuous, that we don't want anyone to be left behind. If we think according to a circle, while if we think according to a yardstick, it's all about following the leader, and we don't care at all about who's behind us. Does that make, is that a good, a suitable compliment, Lowell?
You'll see in my presentation where I take a yardstick to a circle to a very different image. I'll present that later.
Well, I am not hung up. I certainly understand what everybody's saying, keeping in mind that I've been away from this for a long time. But even when you're trying to take that lower level of people and involve them in the system and designing that virtuous interaction, there's still a component there of information. And how do those people, as happened during our American Revolution, where does that information come from to enable them to actually participate and design their own virtuous system or virtuous interaction in a system?
It comes from the first Bill of Rights, which is the art of assembly, freedom of information. You got to keep the arteries of information from being clogged or rerouted by the powerful. And you see this today in our two conferences of the Democrats and the Republicans. Yeah.
And this is where I am coming from too. I think this needs more elaboration. How do we get people back into the system and involved in the interactions in the system in order to go to the next level in society, quite frankly? So, but anyway, I think that we could go on and on about this. And I don't know that that's the topic for today. So I will pass
Jamie,
on this.
Jamie, you were going to say something. Jamie, you were going to say something?
I'll wait, because as Valerie say, we wanna.
Good. Well, why don't we start in? But first, let me introduce Valerie. What little I know of her. You were at the Biological Computer Laboratories with Heinz von Forster. You helped get him the grant, I think, from Stuart Brand on to write and give us talk on the cybernetics of cybernetics, which is one of his, I think, critical articles, where he's basically saying what we're saying right now is without the cybernetics going towards the social sciences, it's just some interesting toys for boys technologies.
That's right. But I was also at the Plato Teaching Computer Laboratory too, but not involved in the educational aspects of that system. I and a number of other graduate students, including Stuart, were involved in demonstrating how communication systems in the future that were computer-based could be used to involve people in decision-making at the local level. So it was a technology, not at that time because we were talking about mainframe computers, but when we had personal computers and all of our technologies that we have now, how could that facilitate citizen participation? And I developed a program on that system. It was a controversial program from a number of standpoints, but it was actually around a real environmental issue that people from the neighboring communities as well as from the university could go through. It was a very linear program, but the whole point was, here is the issue. If you don't understand a word, click on it. You'll get a definition. Here are some options. What do you think about the options? You want to vote on it, type of thing. That's in a nutshell. So that's the other piece of what I did at Illinois. So it was between biological computer laboratory, but even more so the Plato teaching computer system. When I say it was very controversial, people who were invested in Plato, the teaching computer system, really felt that this work that some of us were doing, graduate students were doing, really distracted from the educational focus of that entire system. So that led to a lot of controversy at midnight with the systems people. But when that program was opened up to the communities, it initially got a very, very good response from the mayors, the council people, people off the street, from the university, et cetera. But one of the frequent comments was, who controls this information that people are looking at? Because that becomes very important in the long term. Anyway, that's a little bit more of elaboration, Lowell, on what I was doing at Illinois at that time.
Fantastic. Jamie, you just want to introduce yourself a little bit? I actually don't know that much about you.
All right. The way that I got involved is maybe that's the best way to introduce myself. It starts with, dus I have a PhD in strategic management, and I've been teaching for a while at Binghamton University until I separated myself from the university, and I decided to get involved in the community more and kind of see what was going on there. Now, the person that really informed my thinking was Karl Popper. And so I got invited to a group of people that meet on a regular basis to discuss Karl Popper's work, and Stuart is part of that group. So I sent an email like explaining who I was and why I was interested, and Stuart responded. And so then we exchanged emails for a while. And then Jason got involved, or Stuart introduced me to Jason, and because Jason has this very interesting elaboration of Popper's three-world hypothesis, and that is the thing that I'm also really into. So then I kind of happenstance stumbled into your Club of Remy presentations, and then at some point there was a question, I'm not a member of ASC, so what are I doing here? And then basically the way that was resolved is that maybe Karl Popper and Heinz von Furster really have to teach one another something. Maybe they really can complement one another and make one another stronger. And so it's from that motivation that I'm working. Dus again, my background, management, economics, strategic management. At the time I was doing my graduate work, I learned about Gregory Bateson and the double bind, and I was like super interested. But I kind of moved on to psychoanalysis and how there the issue of the double bind is being addressed. So I didn't really pursue Bateson, but so it was really a great pleasure to kind of reconnect with that argument and see how that can be further developed. So, and then maybe another thing, these days I'm suddenly getting lots of invitations for a system science course from Cornell University, since I'm here in Ithaca, where they're like trying to sell me this concept of systems thinking as like the solution for the future. So it all kind of is very interesting, and I think there is a truth to it that we systems thinking needs to be introduced as early as possible, and the whole concept of feedback loops. And so I'm here to contribute in my small way. So dus I'm technically like semi-retired management professor, if you want to put me in a box.
I also add that Jamie has amazing capacity in terms of knowledge of other thinkers and the ability to synthesize. So Valerie, I see you, the ability to synthesize also. And what we need to be doing, and I've had comments from Ben Sweeting in the UK that does design cybernetics, Thomas Fisher and Candy Hare. Ben Sweeting is moving this weekend, so he can't do it. He'll probably be able to do something later in September. And Candy Hare and Thomas Fisher, her husband, they teach in China. And they do architectural design, etc. And they produced a book on design cybernetics, and they want to participate in October. So we have a very small group, but we need to know one another. So Jason, why don't you give a little background, because you have a fascinating background, tied together also by Stuart, which is not here. I text him again.
Well, you just mentioned the Popper, and you mentioned Hans von Forster. My relationship with these two persons first. Karl Popper is actually a very early read by my generation back in China, because that famous criticism on Marxism. So I was introduced by, Karl Popper was introduced to us as the worst enemy of Marxism. So that raised our interest a lot. So we fall in love with him. And so it's in college years. So we had a little secret discussion group like this. This is not secret, but at that time, that was a secret. So Karl Popper's concept of open society and the criticisms to Marxism is fundamental for us, my generation. And then I went to US in '86, and because I searched all the schools under with the name keyword cybernetics, I found Klaus Krippendorf in UPenn and Stuart Ampleby in George Washington. So I ended up went to George Washington. And of course, Stuart introduced me to the whole concept of second order. Because before I went to US, I was kind of a first order. I did the system dynamics modeling for our province. It's a huge model consists of more than 400 equations. So it's kind of, they're trying to fit that into the concept of a planning economy, more or less in the same way like Stanford Beer did for Chile in 1970s. So I read Hans von Forster very carefully, and also I first time met him in 1989. That was after my second escape from China. And I told Hans that the only book I bought on my way, we went through the whole Trans-Siberia railway. I escaped into Russian, Soviet Union first, and then all the way to Warsaw and to Berlin, and we physically passed the Berlin Wall from underground channel, and so that was the only book I bought. half of the book actually is the Heinz's observing systems, and I showed him the half book. So he said, "Fantastic, fantastic." But so that's my love affair for this group, and Your Honor, and I did field work and trying to put things into practice for the cases I already talked about the last time. So there's a reason that this, I mean, there is a karma that we are. It's our destiny to meet here to keep clarifying these topics and get more understanding.
If I could just give a quick background, I was at Vanderbilt University doing a lot of education reform, created Free University of Nashville, 500 students with the community and the Black colleges. And a high school friend of mine a year ahead of me called up at the end of my senior year and said, "Hey, we're going down to Mexico with Heinz von Forster. Who's he?" And so I drove my Toyota Land Cruiser with Susie Baker from my high school all the way down to Cuernavaca, and my head exploded. I mean, we had Heinz von Forster, we had Gordon Pask, Roberto Maturana. We rented a house with Douglas Engelbart and his two daughters, invented the mouse hypertext in Windows, who I ultimately worked with at Stanford Research Institute. And it was too much for me to understand. You know, there was the practical of Ivan Illich, who put this all together as the think tank of SEDUC, which is a cultural interdocumentation group. And he published the book Deschooling Society, and his whole focus was on webs of learning versus schools and bureaucratization. And that came out of this meeting with people who were the pioneers in computers and how do you design computers from biological systems, etc. So I had a contribution there just on the educational, but there was this whole world of cybernetics that I was just trying to understand. So I went off to the History of Consciousness program at University of California, Santa Cruz, and did my doctorate. One of my advisors was Gregory Bateson. And I looked at rites of passage and the organization of the symbolic universe as you go from a child to an adult. And so the transformation aspects. And Gregory Bateson said, Christy, you know, there's no world of cybernetics out there. Academia doesn't like it. We're an oddity. You know, I've had to go from Hawaii studying porpoises to VA studying psycho folks, family therapy. Go out and do experiments. We need to learn how social systems change. So that's what I've done for 50 years. So that's where I'm coming from. So this is good that we're getting to know one another a little bit better.
So I was a teacher in strategic management. I taught undergraduate students, and before that, before I switched to strategic management, I was actually a molecular geneticist at Purdue University, dus in Indiana, close to Illinois. So I'm really coming more from a theory background, if anything. So I haven't been part of like formal organizations who try to change something. However, when I moved to Ithaca, within 6 months, I got involved with some social change experiment here that I now see can really benefit from systems thinking. And it's a community-driven experiment, so there is no official formal framework. It's more like a self-organizing, evolving framework. And so let me now go and share, and I make this the topic of my presentation. Yeah.
So we need to be thinking about what we'll be talking about next week. I really like this framework here. And, you know, I think if we can get Stuart back, he can talk about research systems, but that set of interlocking systems, how do they interlock? I would like to talk about the American Revolution as a rebellion against the religious systems and the Western tradition chain of being, and how revolutionary it was to create a nation state. So I'm looking at the interface between religious systems and the coordination system. I'd like to present on that. I'm sure someone else, Jamie, you would be interested in family systems or maybe research system education, I don't know. But looking at the interface between components there will give us some handles to look at a set of interlocking systems.
Jamie, are you familiar with the theory of everything, like Ken Wilber, Laszlo?
Yes.
You do?
I have his books, and I can tell he believes in the great chain of being.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
I mean, he talks about that as a guiding principle. So I think that Ken Wilber is not making the proper set of distinctions, and so so that we need to think about what is the first set of distinctions that we need to make. And
that's one direction. I think he co-authored something with Erwin Laszlo, the Alexander Laszlo study. So I will dig it out and email to you, to see if there's any relationship between this framework you are working on with their work. On the other hand, talking about a metaphor, I think second order cybernetics metaphors, or second, like those snakes biting their tails,
yeah.
that sort of metaphor. I think there is a better alternative is that the blind man and the elephants metaphor,
Yes.
which understood by the whole world instead of just the 75 American Society Cybernetic members. I mean, we only have 75 people here, but there's 7.6 million people, a billion, 7.6 billion people are out there. So if we put the blind man elephant metaphor to this current slide, you actually had 5 or 6 elephants here. Each one is bigger than the other, and so we all blind people. I think I had a term to call people who started to learn system thinking super blind people, super blind man instead of just blind man. Now, what's the difference between super blind man and a common blind man? Is super blind man learn some communicatics and try to communicate better than other blinds. So they had a more hope to figure out what eventually that elephant would be. On the other hand, talking back to the design issue, the one-eyed man could be the designer for the world of all blind people. So there is a Hippocratic oath situation here, namely, how can we be sure that what we are doing, what we are designing, is really good? It's virtuous instead of vicious. So I in the email I mentioned that guy Dan Ariely.
Yes.
Dan Ariely, Ariely. If you're familiar with him. Well,
Yes.
he used a very interesting example talking about in the Europe that people have their driver license. There is a code saying that you are willing to donate your organ if something bad happened on you. You donate or you not donate. And he did the research, found that very interestingly, the people in European countries are bipolar. One type of country will almost 100% would donate. And the other type of country, maybe 14 or 20% of people willing to donate. So the first reaction of academics will say, oh, there's probably a cultural difference there. But it turns out not the case, because Austria and Germany on the two bipolar on the two sides. The German people only have a very low percentage willing to donate, and the Austrian people almost 100% donate. So how could that be? Because the two countries' culture are so close, and also Holland, Netherlands, and another Sweden, or Belgium. Belgium and the Netherlands is also on the opposite side. And another one is Denmark and the Swedish. So he kept digging out what's exactly going on, and he realized it's the design of the questionnaire that they use in these countries that really made the difference. In one time, the questionnaire said, if you are willing to donate, please sign your signature here. And in the other country, they say, if you don't want to donate, please sign it. And what really happened is a lot of people, they don't like to make sign signatures. So by design, they are designed to, they really, because this issue is so important, it's cognitively heavy loading. So they don't want to make a decision. So they just choosing, okay, I will just not sign it. So that is an example of, now you even don't know that you are designed, that you made such important decision. And also a lot of, in another commercial world, in a lot of advertisement, they say that you have, well, you have 1,000 euro, you to the Roma, cover everything. And then the other choice is 1,000 euro, you to Paris and cover everything. And so people have a 50-50 choice of these two options, because Roma and Paris are similar, kind of same attractive, similar. And the advertisers, they added the option. They said $1,000, 1,000 euro for Roma, but only cover hotel, but not eating. So they add this third choice, which doesn't make sense, because there's 1,000 euro cover Roma for everything included. So suddenly, when the third option put in intensively by design, a huge portion of people selecting Roma instead of Paris. So he threw out a lot of similar interesting examples there to recommend us that, okay, we cyberneticians, we understand so many complex systems, so we do the designing here. But they are other people that in ETHAC, Jamie, you're working with. They do not see the system as you see. So they should even have a difficulty to see the round circles and the boxes of your drawing. So the question is, how are we going to interact with them, including the BLM activists? So I think both of your presentation are very important. We just need to dig deeper. for the next time, do you want to follow up that question session with Stuart, or do you want to unfold your framework today?
Well, I leave that up to you guys. So now I do know Stuart is not here. So, but I really leave it up to you. So, so Valerie and Lowell, I don't know whether you read the most recent emails. I had asked Stuart about the contradictions that I noticed in second order cybernetics, and that I maybe wanted to talk about those contradictions and how you are dealing with that. And then Jason said, why don't you let's do it the next Zoom session. And so that I would kind of say to Stuart or anyone here, like, these are the contradictions that I'm noticing, and I'm curious what's happening with them. And then the second option then for next week is to continue with this thing. So I personally think, since Stuart isn't here, he kind of lost his position, but it's really up to you
He's
guys.
Not in our reality.
Excuse
he's
me.
not being constructed.
Yeah.
Right. I have to leave right now, and I apologize. I can't do anything about this, but this has been a wonderful discussion. But I did see the email on the contradictions also, and I find it, I would like to pursue that, whether it's next meeting or not. Next meeting makes sense because it's coming, you know, because of your email. So I wouldn't mind having that happen. But again, it's up to you, and I apologize. I have to go.
Yeah, we want to keep this short. So basically, hopefully Stephen Nachmanovich will have his internet back then. So I'd like him to present on the art side, and then we can present on that, and then I can present on the religious revolution of the American side. So we're dealing with the interfaces between components. So.
Okay.
All right.
I will write that up and send it out as a task. How about that?
Cool.
All right.
Cool.
That sounds good.
Great.
I think we've had a very productive discussion today. I think we need to be ultimately bringing it down to what are the gaps that we are identifying, like the Black Lives Matter, my examples, your examples from work, etc., Jason, that allow us to say, what are the problems that we need to address in depth, and then have people from those three components, modern science, our pioneers, and what we can do today, you know.
Yeah.
So,
so what I get then is, so we focus on just continuing what we did today, and then the issue of the contradictions we can do at a later point in another Zoom session, when we know 100% sure that Stuart will be present. Yeah. Because the fact that he's not here, we don't know whether we can rely on him to be there next week.
Yeah, we have to catch him later.
Right,
no problem.
Right. Excellent. Right. Thank you all, and I'll send out a task.
Okay.
Look forward to it. Yeah.
And we can interact during the week and do emails.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. Awesome.